Hello, everybody. You are tuned in to the Walk Off Podcast. We are back here for our next series of our division breakdowns with the NL East. But before that, I want to introduce my friends here. I got Davis and Leroy. How you men doing today?
I'm doing well. The countdown to opening day is on, and I've got my calendar just checking it off every day.
Yeah, man. Every episode we're getting closer to baseball. Weather's starting to maybe get nicer, and I'm really excited.
Yeah, I'm excited. This weather always reminds me of baseball. We're about a quarter way through the spring training games, so we're definitely heating up here towards the regular season. Still a lot more moves and things to talk about though. So we're gonna jump right into things today. We're gonna start by talking about the first team in our NL East. We're gonna talk about the Miami Marlins, aka the winners of pandemic baseball in 2020. Um, they're such an interesting team to look at because when you watch them play last year, there's just in a way no way they should have played as well as they did. They essentially fielded a like a scrap team. But then you really dig down into their farm system and some of these players they do have. They are a pretty exciting team who I think are plagued again, like we spoke before about a really good division that they're in. Um, it's tough for them, but they had a few additions here. The big one for me is outfielder Adam Duvall to this 1 year deal. That's a good deal to bring him in here, see what he can do for your team, see if he's another one of those actual, big name guys for the Marlins that they didn't really have last year. We talked about uh before, so that'll be exciting to see there. I mean, as any team, they lost a few of their arms as well. They lost Brandon Kinser to Philly, as well as Matt Joyce to Philly, who we saw hit that monster home run against the Orioles the other day in spring training. But I'll go to you, Leroy, first. I want to hear what you think about the Marlins going into 2021.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to talk about the NL East. I mean, honestly, this has the potential, and MLB.com has actually named the NL East as the top division in baseball this year, ahead of the AL East and the NL West. And if you think about what's going to happen and potentially play out in the NL East, they've got two potentially elite teams, the Mets and the Braves, that we're going to talk about later, two potentially really good teams in the Phillies and the Nationals, depending on how things shake out. And then they got the Marlins, who were a playoff team last year and a second round playoff team. So, this is just going to be a heck of a division. I think it's going to be one of my favorite divisions to watch. If you think about the talent in the NL East right now, just Acuna, Soto, DeGrom, Trey Turner, Freddie Freeman, Bryce Harper. It's insane the talent that's in the NL East. If you're a fantasy baseball guy like I am, the five of the top 13 ranked fantasy players come out of the NL East. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. And we're starting off with the Marlins, and typically we start off with the team that we project is going to be one of the worst teams. If you look at Fangraphs has four of the five teams projected to finish at 500 or better, and the Marlins aren't far behind in their projections, 73 and 89. If I'm a Marlins fan, there's a lot to be excited about. Um, you know, just take what they did last year. We know they overperformed, right? We know that, but they made some additions this year. Starling Marte is the potential 2020 guy that could hit 300, solidifying their lineup. But they've got some young guys that are really exciting too, and in Jazz Chisholm, a top 100 prospect, and JJ Bleday, and he's already started off pretty hot. He's 1 for 4 with a home run here in spring training. So, if you're a Marlins fan, there's a lot to look forward to. I don't know that they get it done this year. They've got their pitching looked great last year, right? They had Pablo Lopez, Sandy Alcantara, Sixto Sanchez. All of those guys had ERAs of about 3.5 or lower. The Marlins last year had 6 pitchers with six that pitched in 6 or more games, and none of those pitchers were over the age of 25. They've got an embarrassment of riches in young pitching talent. So the question is, they looked good last year. The pitching looked good. The pitching actually carried a quadruple A, lineup to the playoffs last year. And the question is, can it hold up over 162 games? I'm not sure. If I had to guess, I'd say probably not. But hey, you never know. If guys like Marte and Duvall come through, and I think looks like they're going to probably slot Duvall in at their cleanup hitter, as their cleanup hitter. And the young pitching does hold up over the course of 162 games. Hey, this team could be a 500 team. It's not out of the question, right? Not only that, a lot of young talent, especially in the rotation. They are the third-rated farm system. So the future is bright for the Marlins. I don't think it happens for them this year, but my bold prediction is I don't think they're going to finish in the basement. I don't know that they'll hit 500, but I don't think they're going to finish in the basement. So, a lot to look forward to for Marlins fans.
Yeah, I think Miami is interesting. But kind of a brief point about the division. Leroy, you mentioned how competitive it's going to be. There's a lot of talent, and it's funny, because we're talking NL Central in the previous episode, how bad it was, made it completely wide open. This is kind of the opposite. It's really good, so anybody can take it. It's, you kind of like to see that more as a fan. But the Marlins are kind of an enigma to me. They're barely over 500, but they make the extended playoffs and then knock off the Cubs, who at the time I was really high on in that 3-6 matchup. They were incredibly underestimated, and I think, proved everyone wrong last year. It was really cool to see. That being said, I just don't think they have the personnel to prove it wasn't a fluke. But, as Kevin Malone from The Office said, a fluke is one of the most common fish in the sea. So, I hope they can come back. I mean, I think building on that it's a good building block to say, hey, we made a run with players that people didn't think were capable of doing so. But I think you have to remember that, Kim Ang was brought in as the new general manager. It's a historic signing, hiring. It's great for the sport and everything. But when you bring in a new executive, she's going to want to bring in players. There's going to be change. So for that reason, I don't think 2021 is going to be the best year for the Marlins, because I think it's going to be a little bit of a transitional year. Justin mentioned some of the pitching is gone. Kinsler, Boxberger, missing a lot of the bullpen. They signed Anthony Bass from Toronto. Detweiler's a pretty good pickup, but I think the bullpen could be an issue. I think that's one of the glaring points for me. But they do have some capable pieces and good pitching. Aguilar, Brian Anderson, Corey Dickerson, those are solid guys that, like I said, like Leroy said, I mean, that could be a 500 team that toward the end of the season gets hot or something. You really don't know in this division. So it's going to come down to crucial divisional series for them. Like, going to have to knock off the Braves a couple of times, going to beat the Nationals. I think there's a lot of capable talent on this team. I just don't know if they can replicate the success in a full season. We've mentioned this before. It's the shortened season kind of made it, some good teams play bad and some, in this case, not so good teams played pretty good. So I see them as maybe like 15 to 20 games under 500 realistically, but they got a bright future too. And like we mentioned, the division is wide open. So I wouldn't put it past them to surprise us again.
Yeah, I think Leroy putting on the Marlins hat. Okay, we see you, but yeah, I really do think this is going to be an exciting team to watch for a couple different ways. Because first off, they certainly have that good major league talent in their lineup. I mean, you look at Jesus Aguilar, who the last year he kind of found his stride again, but the year before 2019 was a down year. If he picks up the production that he did when he was in Milwaukee, in 2018. That's a huge player for your lineup. And then, like we said, we bring in Adam Duvall. If he can do well, a seasoned guy, veteran who was playing on a lot of very good teams also in that division, can definitely play a part. But I want to talk about their farm system. It's just so good. And that's why they're so exciting to watch. And we know in today's MLB that is one of the biggest ways, like, you build your team. And along with having 5 prospects in the top 100, or their highest is only number 20 with Sixto Sanchez. But as we know, those numbers kind of don't mean much. So we saw him come up last year and pitch to, I think it was like a 340 or 360 ERA in that short season. He was definitely good, so players like that are exciting to watch. And this lineup is built really funky. Out of their 40 players on their 40-man roster right now, 24 of them were acquired via trade somehow, which that's a pretty astounding number. Because when I look through the rest of the teams in the league, the average seems to be anywhere around like 15 to maybe 20. This is a team that's just shipped off everyone and just brought in all these players. And eventually you start to see that come up. And I'm real excited to see the new front office work and see how that works out with this new team, because you see them go out and get bullpen arms to replace what they lost to this season. So it's not that they're sitting here like an Orioles where they say, let's look 3 years from now. They are looking right now, and in a good division. They're playing a lot of good teams in that division and a lot of good teams in the AL East. So that will be, I think, the deciding factor for them. I think that'll be very tough, but it's going to be exciting for the Marlins. But Leroy, I want to go to you. You got that face. It looks like you wanna say something.
No, I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think as we go through and talk about the NL East, I think, at least in my mind, it's going to become clear on where I land, is that this is a division split between teams that are on the rise and teams that are on the fall. And the Marlins are clearly a team on the rise. But here's the thing, and again, it'll play out as we talk. Um, you've got 4 teams in the NL East that are huge spenders, right? 2 of those teams are on the rise or staying at the elite level where they already have been, and 2 of those teams are on the fall. Then you've got the Marlins, who are Tampa Bay National League, and they're going to have to do it in a similar manner as Tampa Bay. They're not going to go out and spend a bunch of money. They're going to need to build up the farm system, and look at what they've done. Look at their look at where their young talent is. It's in their arms, exactly the way Tampa Bay does it. So I think, I think the Marlins are going to surprise some people, and maybe it's not this year. But again, I don't think they'll finish in the basement. And to be honest, I'm not going to predict this, but I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't finish third. And if they don't finish third in 2021, I think in 2022, third or second place is in play.
All right, so we got it. Leroy has the Pirates winning the World Series and the Marlins coming in second. So that's his hot takes for the day. But we're going to move on to the next team here in the NL East. So recent World Series winner, the Washington Nationals. As Oriole fans, we can sit here and say plenty, but in itself, there's actually a lot to say about this lineup. When you look at this lineup, I truly do think it is somewhat stacked. You look conflicted there with that hat and that jacket on, my friend. Well, that's all right.
It doesn't match at all, but that's okay. I'm in the comfort of my own home.
See, this is why they take you to the basement, right? They kick you out and throw you down there.
I'm wearing hats of all the teams, the little league teams of my kids that I've coached over the years. So
that's fair. I know I got a whole bunch of old tiny little MLB jerseys from playing T-ball back then. But here I want to look at the Nationals here. First off, I want to talk about Juan Soto. I want to have a hot take here. You look at this kid in right field. He's just an absolute beast. He's what now? I think this is going into his 4th season. Really has come into his own. I look at him as an MVP candidate, as one of them. Every year when they come in, you know he's going to be great, and he's going to incredibly help this team again in a very good division, along with who I think is the most underrated shortstop in MLB. I know Davis agrees with me there with Trey Turner. Another real young player is just a beast. You bring in Josh Bell, who had it down last season in that shortened season, but I think it was 2019. He absolutely just shined, especially at the plate. I think he had 37 doubles and 37 home runs. That's just, that's like on another planet. And then now he's going to get to do it on a bigger stage, bigger market with a better team. I think will really help them, along with Kyle Schwarber, who Fangraphs has him playing left field. I thought that one was odd because I would be excited to see him DH in Washington, but MLB hates its fans, so we already knew how that went. And then you have Starlin Castro coming back. This is one guy I will admit now. I liked him when he was in New York. I was not going to say it then, but a young kid, he's another one, came out of Miami, just plagued by injuries. He's one I would really like to see stay healthy and produce this season. Would really be kind of like underrated guy, in that lineup, as they're known for their rotation, which they even added to that a little bit. But Mr. Leroy, with the Nationals hat on, I want to hear your thoughts on our Orioles neighbors for this year.
Yeah, so I said earlier, there's, in the NL East, there's risers and there's fallers, and unfortunately, I see the Nationals as fallers, and I'll go into some of the reasons why in just a minute. But I do want to touch on what you said about Juan Soto. Juan Soto's he's an insane talent. He may be right now, he's 22. He may be taking the baton from Mike Trout as the best player in baseball and potentially the face of baseball if Major League Baseball chooses to promote him as they should. But we know how that typically works out. But I think he's grabbing the baton from Mike Trout, and the Nationals have a really big decision to make coming up because he's also a free agent after 2024, which doesn't seem too far off, but it's getting there. And as far as free agency goes, the Nationals have not exactly hit home runs, right? They chose to give Steven Strasburg a big contract, which left Rendon available, right? And probably instead of Harper, but yeah, Juan Soto. We talk often about Fernando Tatis because we say he's maybe the most exciting player in baseball. He may be, but Juan Soto may be becoming, if he's not already, the best player in baseball. Last year, albeit a shortened season, Juan Soto had an OPS plus of 212. Okay, that doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but just know that that's the best OPS plus since 2004. And if you remove Barry Bonds from the equation, for whatever reason you want to remove Barry Bonds, it's the best since 1998, Mark McGuire. Juan Soto is a monster. You already touched on Trey Turner, and I'm right there with you, one of the best shortstops in the game. But here's where my issues come in. It's question mark after question mark lineup wise. As far as the Nationals go, they're really counting on, not only in their lineup, but in their rotation, they're counting on bounce back seasons from a lot of people. You mentioned Schwarber, you mentioned Bell. They're hoping for both of those guys to bounce back. Both of those guys were available for a reason too, right? They're looking for bounce back seasons from Strasburg, who pitched in 2 games last year. He's coming off surgery. Max Scherzer wasn't Max Scherzer last year. His walk rate was up, his numbers were down, and he's 36. And then, of course, there's Corbin, who, again, he struggled a little bit. Their bullpen's a problem. It has been even during their World Series season. Their bullpen was an issue. So, the Nationals are one of those teams that are on their way down, unfortunately for them. But their major league team is old, to be quite honest. Take out Juan Soto and Trey Turner, but they're older. A lot of question marks behind Soto and Turner, even the big 3 pitchers, a lot of question marks there and behind it. Their Prospects 1500 rated their farm system as the worst in baseball. They're a team that's going to struggle here upcoming. Hey, but they got their World Series win, right? That buys them 10 years grace. Or if you're Orioles fans, it buys you 40 years grace, whatever. But yeah, I said earlier that I didn't think the Marlins were going to finish in last place, and if they don't, one of the 2 teams that could finish behind them is the Nationals, I think.
I think the Nats are a weird case, coming off a World Series run, 2019, they really dropped the ball last year. And I've said it in this episode, I've said it many times, like the shortened season is hard to judge this individual stats, team stats, because they were only, 26 and 34 in a full season. They could have easily bounced back and maybe proven us wrong. I agree they have weaknesses, but I think, finishing last place, I don't know if it's an indicator moving forward. It could be. Kurt Suzuki's gone. I think that was a big loss. They bring in Alex Avila, which on paper is a pretty even switch, but Suzuki was a kind of a heart and soul guy. So I'm interested to see how that affects the pitching staff. Bringing in Josh Bell and Schwarber, I think it complements Soto and Robles. It's a nice move. I don't think it's elevates them much. And, Leroy, you took the words right out of my mouth talking about Juan Soto. I think we're going to talk about some breakout players, and I sort of took a different spin because I don't think Soto's a breakout player. He's obviously already performing really well, but I think this year is where he steps up into like top 3, top 5 player in baseball. I think he takes a huge step in national media coverage, and I think he becomes the face of this team. He is so talented and still so young. I think he's a dark horse MVP candidate. Maybe not even a dark horse. I think he's that good. he's a passionate player. He can field well, hits for average, hits for power, speed. He's a complete player, and it's hard to dislike a guy like that. Even on a team we might not like, he is so good, and they'll be fun to watch. It kind of reminds me of Harper on the Phillies to an extent. It's like we're going to talk about them later, but when you have a few really good guys and a bunch of question marks in the lineup, what does that produce? It's hard to predict. I think the pitching staff is pretty strong when everyone's healthy, but I'm not sure. This whole Strasburg in 2020 I think it was a mistake even playing him in the shortened season, because when he did play, he was visibly still injured, and I thought they rushed him back. I thought that was a bad decision for a guy has an obvious injury history. So he's pretty crucial to their 2021 season, I think. I don't know much about his health, which I'm sure we'll see in spring training and moving forward, but I think that's crucial to tie in guys like Scherzer, Corbin, Austin Voth. They even signed John Lester as a added guy in their veteran presence. So I think it complements well. I mean, they're going to get some run support out of Trey Turner and Soto, but again, I just don't know about the rest of the lineup really. And, Justin, you were kind of touched on it. I think Trey Turner is one of the best shortstops in the game. I think he's going to be really tough on opposing pitchers this year. His numbers have been consistently well, even in a bad season last year. So it's hard for me to see this team under 500, but I think in such a competitive division, it's just hard to say they make the playoffs. I think they'll be somewhere around 500, maybe over, maybe a little bit under, but I think they're going to come short of the other teams in this division.
Yeah, it's kind of is tough for the Nationals in this division, because when you look at their lineup, I do think they have the people that can produce, especially if you can get some comeback years from a couple of players like Kyle Schwarber. Maybe a change of scenery can do him well. Then you look at their starting rotation is the thing that worries me the most when you look at going forward in the next couple years. They have, before I talk about the rotation, they have one player in the top 100 this year. Like Leroy said, they named it the worst farm system in baseball. Their highest prospect was number 81 out of the top 100. And you look at their starting rotation from the top to the bottom right now as it speaks on Fangraphs: Max Scherzer, Patrick Corbin, Steven Strasburg, John Lester, and Joe Ross, all of whom was drafted before 2010, other than Joe Ross, who was drafted 1 year later in 2011. When your entire rotation is very well not even in the league in the next 3-4 years, that puts you in a really tough spot, especially for a team who was built off of that rotation and spending money on said rotation. Is, yeah, they won a World Series. They also were very, very close to the luxury tax. They weren't that small team with good players. They definitely spent the money to, bring in the people to win that World Series. But I'm more excited to see their lineup. I really want to see how Victor Robles progresses, as he was one of the top prospects in baseball a couple years ago. And then, of course, Juan Soto. Like, we'll talk about him more. He's just one of those players you can't dislike. But we're going to jump over here to a team that gets a lot of dislike for a lot of different reasons, and that's the Philadelphia Phillies. So the first biggest thing with this team here, obviously they took their sweet time doing it, but they did re-sign JT Realmuto. Obviously, he's just your team is better with him on the field regardless. McCutcheon's going to come back. He'll be healthy this year. He's had a decent spring training so far. Nice to see him, healthy. He's always one of my favorite players. They bring in a couple good arms here. They bring in Archie Bradley, got him from Arizona to help that absolutely atrocious bullpen from last year, because that was awful. You bring in anybody, I think that's going to help that bullpen for sure. You also bring in Matt Moore on a 1-year deal. They bring in Brad Miller in the infield. They re-signed Didi, who I've always said is a little underrated at shortstop. So this is a team that's really on the brink of, are they going to win, or are they trying to figure something out? And you don't see their lineup change too much from last year, other than that bullpen, which is something that needs to definitely needs to change. The second worst bullpen in MLB history, which we watched the Orioles get to them a couple times last year in late innings and a couple really exciting games. But Davis, I'll go to you first. I want to know what you think about the Phillies.
Yeah, you nailed it, man. I mean, the Phillies are always one of the most hit or miss teams in baseball. I think like almost every year. There's been years where they've tanked, and obviously the years they've been really good. Even then, going into the season, you didn't know what you're going to get out of them. And last year, missed the playoff despite some up and down weeks in the season, and again, shortened season. But the biggest move obviously is bringing Real Muto back after months of, is he leaving? Is he staying? Do the Mets want him? All this. And we talked about it when it happened, months back, but it's a move that had to be made. It's a move that if you don't make, you're falling way behind in the division. So to grade their offseason is kind of tough, because if you lose him and okay, who are they going to replace him with? That's all you're going to talk about. So I think it's one of those things where that was their number one priority, bring him back. Bryce Harper vouched for him all season long. So if you don't re-sign him and your star player is upset you didn't bring back his other star player, his teammate, it's a recipe for disaster. So I think re-signing him was the biggest move of the offseason they could have possibly had, and it was a good one. And you bring back Didi as well, who's a criminally underrated shortstop, very solid bat, good fielder. It's going to come down to Harper getting back to that top elite level. He's looked good in spring training. He hasn't quite looked like that face of the game kind of guy that we saw flashes of with the Nats. But even in 2019, it's only full season with the Phillies. 98 runs, 114 RBIs, 35 homers. I mean, he was doing well, and the Phillies were just terrible. And I think he's still one of baseball's elite, and to sleep on a player of his caliber is foolish. And you pair that with who I consider the best catcher in baseball, I think that's potential to make a run in any division. So I think they could compete with the top teams in this division. I think, matching up against the Braves, the Mets, I think they can win those games early. And yeah, I mean, we're talking about the bullpen. That was so bad. There's no way they could have gotten worse. Whoever they bring in is going to make them better. Archie Bradley being the big one, Kinsler coming in. I think those are good signings. I think they're not a good bullpen. It's not like something to write home about, but they're not going to blow every game in the end of the, seventh inning or something. I don't have the numbers on how many they blew, but it was really evident that was their biggest issue last year. So the top three starting pitchers in their rotation are really strong with Nola, Wheeler, and Eflin. So that's tough for anybody matching up 1, 2, 3 back-to-back games on with those guys and pair them with the power hitters they've got. I think we're looking at maybe 5 to 10 games over 500 for Philly. It remains to be seen if that'll be enough to compete with the Mets, Nats, Braves, Marlins. But I think the Phillies could sneak in. I don't think they will, but I think the door is definitely open for them. If Real Muto can, respond well to getting that big contract. We've talked about catchers aging. He's already 30. So, and, the Phillies might be inspired by 76ers after they've already won the title and NBA. So maybe that'll be some extra motivation. So we'll see.
Davis, 12 is the answer. They blew 12 saves in a 60-game
season. That doesn't surprise me.
historically bad. So, again, going back to this idea that there are some rising teams and there's some falling teams in the NL East, and the Phillies are one of those teams that are just falling. I think they're on their way down. They're getting older. Their farm system is not good. It's ranked 24th. They have little to no major league ready talent right now in their minors. They have some talent, but it's lower level. We know that's a crapshoot. The Phillies are in trouble. I don't think their trouble is as immediate as the Nationals, meaning this year. They're projected to go 81-81. We know that could kind of go either way. You talk about their bullpen, which is obviously their weakest link. God, their bullpen had a 7.06 ERA last year. When we did some articles last year on BaltimoreBattery.com, make sure you visit. I was often looking at the bullpen of the Orioles and other teams that they were playing. And, a lot of times we'd see some bad bullpens and they'd be, their ERA would be in the 5s, low 5s. When you see 7.06, you just go, you got to be kidding me. Their rotation, Davis, you mentioned it, Nola and Wheeler are as good as any two that you're going to come across. Eflin is a potential breakout candidate, but that's potential. And then after that, there are some question marks, a lot of question marks. They've got a lineup that can hit right? Real Muto, you mentioned Hoskins, Baum, who looked great last year in short time, Harper and McCutchen. But they've got a lot. They just have a lot of question marks. They've got some injury history, McCutchen, et cetera. They've got a bullpen issue. They've got a rotation that, depending on how Eflin performs, could be more bad than good or more good than bad. It can kind of go either way. So yeah, the Phillies they're a team going in the wrong direction. If there's a team that's going to finish below the Marlins, I mentioned the Nationals earlier. I think it could potentially be the Phillies as well if things don't break their way. So I'm not real high on the Phillies. I don't think they end the season with a winning record, and I don't really think they're a candidate for a playoff spot. And the Phillies have the second longest playoff drought in baseball behind Seattle. So that could continue this year and beyond because their future isn't exactly bright. But they've got money. We talked about we talk about these teams that are headed in opposite directions, and we look at their current makeup, their current roster makeup. Both the Phillies and the Nationals are relatively old in their current roster makeup. Both the Phillies and the Nationals have relatively poor farm systems. So the question is, what do they do? The Nationals, for instance, they could, trade off Juan Soto, get a boatload of prospects next year or the year after. The Phillies, again, do these teams start to rebuild like we saw the Orioles do, or do they start spending some money and try to build up what they have? And we've seen teams do that with some success. I think, the Red Sox, if you think about, there was a time when their farm system was bad and they just kept pouring money into their major league team. And it gave good results, but then it falls apart eventually. So I think the Phillies are one of those teams, where do they go? Do they start to look to rebuild, or do they keep trying to throw money at their problems? We'll see.
Yeah, if I'm a Phillies fan, I'll just be very frustrated because we've seen just time and time again, this team just soar underneath expectations. It's very frustrating as a Phillies fan to have to watch. When you look at this lineup, I mean, you have Andrew McCutchen, you bring him in a few years ago. He's still an on-base machine. He always was in Pittsburgh. One of my favorite players I've really ever watched in my lifetime. Then you have JT Realmuto, probably one of the best catchers in baseball. Even at 30, he's still going to be very good for you at first base. You have Rhys Hoskins, who, when he's consistent, he can just hit the absolute cover off the ball. But then what do you have to look forward to with this team in the same way as the Nationals? Their just farm system just does not exist. Again, another team with one player in the top 100 at number 32. You have Spencer Howard. And again, I don't want to sit here and say, oh, he's only number 32, because that truly doesn't mean too much, But they don't have much to build back on, which leads me to what you were saying, Leroy. You actually said exactly what I was thinking. With some of the players that you have, you have Bryce Harper for a good bit of time, another, 8 years. And you have Alec Boehm, who came up last year and looked fantastic. He's going to hold that team down at third base for a long time. So at what point do you start shipping some of these good players that give you returns to pair with someone like Bryce Harper and Alec Boehm, who are going to be the face of your team, for a while to come? And some of the best ways that we've seen teams refill their rotation and their bullpens at the major league level is to get those young prospects for major league talent now, build them, and then bring them up through your team. So it's going to be really interesting for the Phillies this year and come the next couple years to see what direction they head in. For Philly fans, I apologize. It's very frustrating. As Oriole fans, we understand, but we have a little more security in the fact that we know where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be interesting for them.
A lot of teams, they often fall into this trap of denial. They think they're a contending team.
I think that's always been the Phillies issue.
It's
right.
It's big market teams too, which Philly is. Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And the Phillies, would they have been better off if they traded Real Muto to last year and got a bunch of prospects? I don't know. We don't know. But if they tank over the next couple of years and end up in or near the basement of the NL East, and they're going to be kicking themselves for not doing that.
And you've got two huge contracts that you're
exactly.
Yep.
You can spend them. You can spend all the money you want, but you missed the playoffs by a decent amount of games with Bryce Harper in your lineup last year. It doesn't mean much. While he was making almost as much. No, honestly, I think he was making more than the World Series representative in the AL as one player. If I know how to do math, which I'm not very good at, but the one thing I do know about math is that it is time for the 7th inning stretch. So we're gonna hand it over to our buddy Jared here.
Good transition there, Justin. Appreciate it, guys. Good show so far. Of course, we're talking about the National League East, and it's going to be a National League East-based 7th inning stretch this week, and we're going to start it off with our weekly trivia question. Leroy is in the lead with 3 points, with Justin and Davis both tied at 2 right behind him. Let's see who can get this week's question. Here we go. 4 of the last 5 seasons have seen the National League East Cy Young Award winner, Max Scherzer in 2016 and 17, and Jacob deGrom in 2018 and 19. Who was the previous winner of that award who came out of the National League East? Think about it.
Jared, do you mean the last National League East pitcher to win before those guys?
Before them, yep.
Jake Arrieta. No. No, you mean was in the NL East then?
Yes.
Okay.
Before Scherzer and deGrom, who was the last person from the NL East to win the Cy Young Award?
I'll go Cole Hamels. I don't know if he even won it, but that's who my guess is.
Okay, good guess. Good guess, Davis.
I'm stumped, man. I don't know.
Okay, we got one locked answer right now with Cole Hamels for Leroy.
I'm stuck on Arrieta. That's throwing me off because he was
Right.
I think so. It'd be before 2015, obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
But how far back?
This is a tricky one. I'm trying to stump you guys this week.
Well, you succeeded.
Since you said that, I'm changing my guess.
Okay.
Oh.
Maybe we're going back to Greg Maddux.
Oh, we're thinking we're going way back.
All right. I'll go kind of far back, but I'm not going to go far. I don't even know if he won one with them, but I'll say Rory Halladay with the Phillies.
I was thinking about that.
That's the last former like really, really good NL East pitcher I can think of.
So
I liked him too.
All 3 of you are thinking it came from Philadelphia Phillies. That's what I'm hearing.
That didn't sound promising.
Okay, so
I'll lock in Halladay. I like it.
Okay, we got a lock.
Yeah. This is my first
We're in this together, Davis.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All guys have locked. Cole Hamels, Roy Halladay. Good guesses, but wrong answers this week. The last person to win this NL Cy Young Award from the NL East was R.A. Dickey in 2012 with the New York Mets. Of course, Dickey was that knuckleballer.
Knuckleball, yep.
And he went, look at this, guys. R.A. Dickey went 20-6 that year with a 2.73 ERA. So there you go. 2012, R.A. Dickey with the New York Mets. Nobody moves up. Nobody moves down on the board. That's okay. We'll get it again next week. But we have to get into the stretch. So let's do it. This is your 7th inning stretch. All right, guys. The Braves announced that they've signed manager Brian Snitker to a 2-year contract extension through the 2023 season. The deal contains a club option for the 2024 season as well. Snitker, he is 65 years old and is a Braves lifer who spent more than 4 decades in the organization, including the past 5 as the big league skipper, leading Atlanta to 3 consecutive division titles. A good run for Atlanta there with Snitker, and hopefully many more to come for Braves fans. All right, Mets president Sandy Alderson said that he expects extension talks with Francisco Lindor and Michael Conforto to begin soon. Both players are scheduled for free agency in 2021. Lindor, for his part, has made it clear that he will not negotiate an extension beyond opening day. And Alderson also put forth Noah Syndergaard's name as a possible extension candidate as well for the New York Mets. And wrap things up on the stretch this week, Nationals left-hander John Lester underwent surgery to have his thyroid gland removed on Friday. The surgery is only expected to keep him out of action for roughly a week's time, according to manager Dave Martinez. Lester, of course, signed a one-year deal, $5 million with the Nationals over the winter, setting the stage for him to slide into that rotation behind Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg, and Patrick Corbin. And the contract reunites him with Martinez, who was his bench coach in Chicago from 2015 to 2017, and with fellow free agent signee Kyle Schwarber. So there you have it. That was the seventh inning stretch for this week. Back to you guys.
Thank you, Jared. As always, a lot of good information in that stretch for you fans. But here we're going to jump into what has been probably our most talked about team here on the Walk-Off podcast. Now we get to talk about everything with them. So we're going to jump to the New York Mets. In my opinion, it's going to be one of the most exciting teams in the MLB this season. Man, some of the players they have acquired and beefed up their lineup with this offseason is just insane. As we know, Francisco Lindor comes over to the New York Mets, just ruins the lives of every Cleveland Indians fan known to man. But that's such a good pickup. You're getting one of the better shortstops in the entire MLB. I don't care if he had a down season in a 60-game season. We know what he can do, and he's still so young. With that trade, you also bring in Carlos Carrasco, who's going to really help solidify that bullpen. Another player I have a lot of love for with what he went through in his career. To be back on the mound pitching at the caliber he was, that's very impressive. You really hope him the best there. You also acquired $24 million from cutting Robinson Cano with his PED scandal. You also bring in Taijuan Walker. He's going to help be another arm in that starting rotation. It's really anyone you get in here, bring in with Jacob deGrom and help him out. That's going to help this team out a lot because their offense is going to be very good this season, in my opinion. You have Pete Alonso at first base. He's showing he's just one of the better power hitters in the MLB. You have Dom Smith, who's just another real good power hitter. If he keeps the strikeout numbers down a little bit, he's going to be a good player. They bring in James McCann at catcher. They were in the running for JT Realmuto. I think bang for buck, they have a better deal with James McCann, who's already getting a lot of love from that team and especially the front office so far in spring. But my biggest thing here with the Mets that we want to look at, a team that was plagued by just awful ownership has finally turned the page, and we're going to finally, for the first time this season, start to see that, in fruition on the field. As obviously we know, their shortstop was brought in. Steve Cohen came in and he said, we're going to get one of our guys. And that's, like we've said before, you're getting your guy with that move. So I think they're going to be a real exciting team. They have a lot of underrated players here with Michael Conforto. I've always thought was really good in the outfield. With Brandon Inno will be in center field according to Fangraphs. It's going to be exciting for the Mets. It's going to be a dogfight between them and Atlanta all year, in my opinion. It's going to not look too much different from the NL West, in my opinion, in terms of the way these two teams battle to the end of the 162-game season for this division. So it's going to be exciting. But I'll go to you, Leroy, first. I want to hear what you think about the Metropolitans.
I guess I should put on my Mets hat. Before we talk. All right.
How many teams have you coached?
This this hat. So this hat, here's just a quick story. When my son was little, it was the last year of Shea Stadium and Yankee Stadium. Both came in the same year. And I decided that even though he was little and probably wouldn't remember, I thought it was a great idea for him to see those stadiums before they left. And so he and I went up, spent a weekend in New York. We went to a Yankees game on a Saturday night and a Mets game on a Sunday. And this was the giveaway. It was Memorial Day weekend, and this was the Mets giveaway. So I actually didn't coach this team. Although my son did play for the Mets, I just didn't coach the team. So, Justin, you kind of hit the nail on the head here, I think, with the change in ownership. Sticking with my theme of the day of teams on the rise, teams on the fall. The Mets are a team on the rise, and it is 100% because of the change in ownership. Cohen has come in and he's kind of put his stamp on this team and has said, this is the New York Mets. This is a New York team, but we're going to treat it like a New York team, which is great. It's great for baseball. The Mets probably made the biggest move of the offseason in bringing in Carrasco and of course Lindor. If you don't think that had a big effect, let's take a look at Fangraphs projections before that trade. Before that trade, Fangraphs projected Atlanta to go 93-69, and the Mets to go 86-76. That's a 7-game difference. I mean, that's big. That's not like a game here or a series win versus a series loss. That's 7 games. That's a lot. After that trade, they had Atlanta projected to go 92-70, and the Mets going 91-71. So that trade made a 5-game improvement for the Mets and put them in that position where, if they go 2-1 instead of 1-2 in a series against the Braves, they win the division and the Braves don't. So it's huge. Before that trade, Atlanta's playoff projected percentage was 83.8% to make the playoffs. After that trade, it was 78.5. So a 5 percentage point difference. Not huge, but something. Now the Mets before that trade, their playoff projected playoff percentage was 41.5%. So they were more likely to miss the playoffs than not. 41.5%. After that trade, it went up to 72.4. So Fangraphs, who we all follow and respect, think that the Mets deal was huge and potentially big enough to surpass the Braves. I personally don't think so. We'll talk about that later. So a couple of things about the Mets. For one, Justin, you talked about it a little bit. Their lineup is nasty. 1 through 8 is up. Their hitters are above average, and it's just crazy to think. And their pitching staff with DeGrom and Carrasco sitting at the top, Stroman at number 3, who has the potential to be. We've seen what he can do. I mean, we watched him play in Toronto, and then you've got Walker and potentially Lucchesi as 4 and 5. Those are both guys that at one time were looked at as top pitching prospects. So they've got the rotation to match their hitting. If there's anything I think that could hold the Mets back from surpassing the Braves, and I think this will come into play just because we've seen it so often over the years, because baseball is such a funny game. It's teams need time to gel. And, if it takes them 30 games and they sludge through the first 30 games at at 500, or the first 40 games at 500, that could be enough for a team as talented as the Braves to get a lead that's hard to surpass. So I think the Mets are going to take a little time to gel. I don't think this is their year winning the division. I think it might be next year, maybe, although I do like what the Braves have going on too. But yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun to watch. This is going to be just as much fun, I think, if not more fun to watch than the Dodgers and Padres.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Mets this offseason. Just to reiterate, new owner, Steve Cohen, committed to spending big to win big, going all in on bringing the Mets to the top. I worry about whether this team is going to make it or crash and burn. I think these high expectations out of nowhere are a little bit tough on a team, like you just said, Leroy, that hasn't had any time to gel. It's funny, I ran into a guy with a Mets hat on today at work, and I just thought I'd ask him with the show coming on today. I said, are the Mets going to win the East? Quickly, he said no. But he said, this is the most excited I've been about a season in a long time. And I think that sums it up. I got a lot of notes here, but that pretty much sums up how I would feel as a Mets fan, how I feel as someone that doesn't really mind the Mets in a city that they share with the Yankees, who is the Orioles rival, right? I think if you're a Mets fan, even if it doesn't work out, you got to be excited that they're really giving it an effort. I don't think the Mets quite hit it out of the park like they said they would, but you miss out on the Bauer signing, Correa, but they made some great moves that former Mets teams would never make in recent history anyway. And of course, the blockbuster Lindor move, the Mets fleeced the Indians in that trade. I mean, to bring in Carrasco too and give up what they gave up, you bring in one of baseball's top shortstops, a crucial position. He's still only 27, and he was the heart and soul of that Indians team. And then Carrasco provides some serious pitching improvement that, they wanted in Bauer, but I think it's still serious improvement for them. And I love the McCann signing. We've talked about how catchers fall off later in their careers. I worry about Real Muto. I still think he's the real deal. I think he's the best catcher in baseball, but bringing in a safer bet like McCann, who doesn't have as big a contract, is, I think, a safe move with the pieces they already have, like Lindor. You bring in Trevor May, solid reliever. That's a pretty good rotation with them. They got DeGrom, Peterson, Matz, Marcus Stroman. They got pieces in the pitching department too. But I worry about a team that has struggled so bad and now all out of nowhere is supposed to be a playoff team. I worry about that happening this year. I'm not worried about them long term. If they can lock up Lindor, I think this team is built to make a run next year, 2 years, 3 years from now. But I don't know if it's all going to come together this quickly. With that being said, I think this is still easily the best Mets lineup we've seen in a long time. So, like I said, if you're a Mets fan, you got to be excited. This is cool that they're finally making some moves. The Mets fan I ran into, I forgot to mention, he had some choice words for the former owners. I think that's kind of the vibe with their fan base. It's got to be an exciting time, even if it doesn't work out. I think they're a step above the Phillies. I think it's close. I think both teams will be behind the Braves, but like you said, Leroy, with the direction these teams are trending, we might see them have a very similar record to the Phillies, which would be bad for the Phillies and, not too bad for the Mets, but it depends on what direction you're trending. It's rising and falling. So if the Mets end up over 500 and pushing for the playoffs, it's hard to say that's a bad season, but I think they could sneak in. I think they'll be right on the brink of that wild card spot. And it's going to be exciting to watch this year. Also, the Bauer signing in LA, we saw some Twitter beef and stuff. I think that kind of lit a fire under some of the guys, which will be fun. Might be a fun series if they play each other at some point. So I think the Mets are going to be a fun team to watch.
Yeah, Davis, I'm glad you brought that up because I think the thing that sucks the most about continuing to do like the real close proximity schedule this season again, like we saw last year, is we don't get to see the Mets get to hit against Trevor Bauer, who would probably come up and try and pitch to him with one eye closed like he was today.
It'd be a great postseason matchup, though. That'd be cool if it happened.
That would, and I don't see a reason why I don't think that couldn't be, because to say if in 162 games we know the Braves are going to be a very good baseball team, they win this division. I truly do think the Mets, and especially the way their team is built very soundly, can make that run for that wild card spot. If they win that wild card game, we know how playoff seeding goes. The Dodgers, get that first seed like they're expected to, and we could see a very exciting series between them. But going back to just how this team is built, I think they have a very good team to last 162 games. Like you said, Leroy, if they can start gelling together, like we saw like the Nationals did in 2019, as they started out well below 500, they were looking like a bottom NL East team, ended up winning the World Series. They have a lot of depth on this team too. They bring in Jonathan Villar, as we know. He's going to score you a bunch of runs off of stolen bases and opportunities that a player like him and his speed creates. They bring in Kevin Pillar, who's just a seasoned veteran in the outfield. Certainly, a nice little bat and good glove when you need him to. He's not the starting center fielder he once was in Toronto. He absolutely tormented my teen years against the Orioles. But I think it's going to be a very exciting team to watch. Mets fans have something to be excited for, even if it is just this new owner, other than him on Twitter, as apparently he's off of Twitter already. They bullied him off of there. But there's a lot of things to look for, and especially Marcus Stroman. That's one I wanted to point at, especially talking about this Twitter beef that was going on with Trevor Bauer and Marcus Stroman. He's just, I think, has been slept on. I think he has the potential to come out here and pitch as well, if not better than Trevor Bauer this season. Especially, I saw on Twitter he has a new pitch. I think it was some split something. I can't remember what it was, but didn't look fun to hit against or really even catch. So I'm keeping my eye on Marcus Stroman this year and on Twitter between the two of them as well, because that's going to keep going, in my opinion. But
does Tony La Russa have a Twitter? Just curious.
I think he does,
tweet.
But he's got to blow into a breathalyzer before he accesses it. We don't get anything good.
I got you.
He's got to blow 0.8 or less. 0.08.
He would be getting on Twitter on his flip phone. I don't know if that guy has graduated to smartphone yet. But we're gonna jump over here. We're gonna talk about our last team in the NL East. Obviously, a very exciting team, going to be very good here. The Atlanta Braves, who last season had a disappointing loss in the playoffs. They were that one game away from the World Series, and they kind of just crumbled against the Dodgers, which can be a respectable loss. As we saw, those Dodgers were just looked almost unbeatable last year. This is a team I would really like to see get over that hump. It's a team we've been waiting for them to really get over that. And with this lineup, there's absolutely no reason to. Because when they re-signed Marcell Ozuna here, when you look at the top four in their lineup, it is just absolutely stacked. I mean, you have Ronald Acuna leading off for you. Then you have Ozzie Albies, Freddie Freeman, last year's MVP, and then Marcell Ozuna. And that's your first four. And when you're putting those guys up to bat 3-4 times a game, you're causing a lot of trouble for opposing teams. And as we saw and we have spoken about in this NL East, not some of the best pitching staffs and bullpens. And, they're going to take advantage of that, rack up those wins when they're going to need to get that lead on a team like the Mets. As Leroy was saying, those 3-4 games, it makes a big difference. It doesn't look like much, but it definitely makes a big difference. But I'm really excited about the Braves. I want to go to you first, Davis, here. I want to see what you think about Atlanta.
I love Atlanta. I think, and I'll explain my reasoning, but I think the Braves might be the most slept on team in baseball. Now, I say that everybody knows they're good, but people, I think, forget that they were one game away from being the Dodgers last offseason. And I get that the Padres are going to be incredible. The Mets are looking great. The Cardinals are an exciting team. But we're talking about these teams moving up and getting better. I think the Braves already were that close, are still that good. And realistically, I mean, I'd love to say the Padres can do it or the Mets, any other team. But I think realistically, with how good the Dodgers are, I think the Braves are the only team that can knock them off. I mean, I'd love for another team to prove me wrong, but seeing off of last season, I think this is the only team that could beat them. And if you beat the Dodgers in the NLCS, I don't think anything's stopping you from winning the whole thing. Re-signing Ozuna was a big move. It reminds me of the Real Muto signing, because it's like that's a guy you just have to bring back. If you don't bring him back and you try to replace him, you're just getting weaker. And they're a team that doesn't need to reach out and get big new pieces. It's kind of about keeping the core together, the core of a team that, like I said, one game away. So I don't know. I think you have to bring him back with such competitive division rivals. They add a couple pitchers. Smiley's a guy I like, a veteran they added. Morton signs a pretty big deal. I think he could still be reliable, especially in the playoffs. But the Braves have won the division the last 3 years. So to pick against them, even with the Mets coming up, I think is foolish. I think they'll win the division again by a handful of games. I don't know. Freddie Freeman's at the top of his game, coming off MVP season. Ozuna's hitting bombs. Acuna's elite. Dansby Swanson coming to his own. I mean, this team is stacked. I think if the Dodgers just didn't exist, the Braves would be like the face of baseball. This would be the elite team. So I think it's one of the most balanced rosters from top to bottom. I think they're just being criminally underestimated in comparison to the Dodgers. I think they're right below them. With these teams coming up, it's exciting though, because it's going to be good games. The Padres, Mets are going to push. I think Mets, Braves are going to be some really good games, good series. So yeah, the Mets could prove me wrong, but I think it's the Braves division to lose. Not only do I think they'll win the division, I think they'll be right back in the NLCS, maybe giving the Dodgers a run for their money. And, not to mention playing so many tough divisional series throughout the year is going to really toughen them up for games that matter late in the playoffs. Like I said, probably against the Dodgers. So this is a tough team, and I think they could really make a run this year.
Yeah, Davis, I echo a lot of what you're saying. It's a shame because the Braves don't get the respect I think they deserve, and they haven't for 3 decades, to be quite honest. If the Braves win, a couple of more World Series, we're talking about them as a dynasty that's right up there with some of the greatest of all times. I mean, if you look, so they started this run in 1991, 30 years ago, before you guys were born, and when I was just getting my driver's license. Jesus. But anyway, over the last 30 years, the Braves have made the playoffs 20 times. They've had 5 losing seasons in the last 30 years, and they've had 18 90-win seasons. but we just, we don't talk about them in that vein just because they haven't won the championships that, that they probably should have. But, they come into this year again being criminally underrated. Baseball prospectus. We talk a lot about fan graphs, and we all four kind of reference fan graphs as far as their projections and respect them. But baseball prospectus has been pretty accurate over the years too with their projections. They have projections called Pakoda Projections, and they take the players' projections and they simulate the games, however many thousands of times. And in the simulations this year, they have the Mets winning about 96 games, 95 and a half. They have the Braves winning 82 games. Yeah, it's I gave the same face as you did, Davis. And now that we're on YouTube, please follow us. You can see that face that Davis just made. And Pakoda projects that many of the Braves players are going to regress greatly, Marcell Ozuna being one of them, and that the Mets players are going to outperform what they did last year. They feel that the Braves outperformed last year, but it just goes to kind of show you the disrespect that the Braves are getting this year. And being Orioles fans, we felt it from 2012 to 2018 or 17. Every year, right? We saw the same thing. We were being disrespected, and it doesn't take into account things like it doesn't weigh heavily enough on things like teamwork, teams gelling together, defense, etc. So, the Braves are being underrated this year. They do have some question marks. Can Soroka come back and be what he was? If he can, if he can do that, I think that's it. Done. Done. Braves easily win this division. But they're stacked up front. We talked about it with Freeman, Ozuna, Acuna. But not only that, I mean, they've got guys that under them that could really take off this year. As I was looking into who would be a good breakout candidate this year, I kept coming across Braves players: Christian Posh, Kyle Wright, Dansby Swanson, and I went back and forth between Ian Anderson and I kind of disqualified Ian Anderson because I feel like he broke out last year. So I'm thinking Austin Riley is the potential to be the next huge hitter on the Braves. And if you look at his stats last year, they weren't great. He only batted .239, but his expected batting average was .262. His slugging was .415, but his expecting slugging was .471, to suggest that he had some bad luck. His plate improvement, or his plate discipline improved greatly last year. His walk rate was up to 7.8%, which was over 2 points higher than the year before. And his strikeout rate dropped to 23.8%, which was 13 percentage points better than the year before. I think he's got everything to put it together. And we could be talking about Austin Riley as another one of those Braves big hitters. And if that happens, it's lights out for the Mets.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ways this Braves team can be even better than we saw last year. We know Ronald Acuna, he came up and just became a superstar really at a very, very young. It's still very young. Obviously, we know Freddie Freeman is arguably the best first baseman in baseball, but they're still just reloading this team, and it's almost going under the radar. We're not looking at the Braves or their farm system or the way they're building. It's building this superpower, because you look at the Dodgers and then now the Padres. But please don't forget that the Braves had a 3-1 lead on the Dodgers before they pulled a Golden State Warriors. Sorry, Jared. But you should still look at that. Other than them blowing that lead, there's a lot of things to look forward to coming this year. As you saw, Ian Anderson, like you said, last year, Leroy, kind of broke out last year. You look at Christian Pache in center field. I think he's going to have a big year this year. You pair him next to Ronald Acuna, and then you're going to have Marcell Ozuna in left field a good amount of the time. People like to say he's not a great outfielder, which he's no. We're not saying that, but he's serviceable in the outfield. And you want his bat in the lineup without the DH. He's a major league player. He's going to have to play in that outfield. But like you said also, Lee, where if they can get Soroka back and then have the rotation of Fried and Soroka and then Ian Anderson, that's pretty dangerous. When you look at the Mets, the thing I think that might be best about them could be the rotation. And as we know, pitching is most of baseball. If your pitching isn't there, it doesn't really matter who you have in your lineup. But luckily for the Braves, they have a lineup that can really get you even after their first four. They have some real underrated players. Travis d'Arnaud, I think, is one of the most underrated catchers in baseball. When it is playoff times and the lights are on, he shows up. And Dansby Swanson, who was a former first overall pick, actually, I'm pretty sure, just really has been solid for this team. It's going to be really exciting to see how they progress this year with the 162 game season. I think they're built a lot better than every other team in the AL East, or the NL East, pardon me, to, succeed throughout a 162 game season. Because don't forget, it has been odd for these players. You see in spring training, they're cutting innings off and playing only 6-7 inning games. I mean, these players haven't played that much in a while, but the Braves are filled with players that are going to play 140, 150 games for you, and they're going to produce in every single game that you put them in. And I want to look at Ronald Acuna. You want to talk about dark horse MVP candidate? I think he's another one. If he stays consistent, he's hitting his home runs. He steals a lot of bases, hits a lot of extra base hits in terms of doubles. He's really going to help the team. He's going to be a MVP candidate this season. I'm going to go back to you two real quick. You have any last thoughts on the Braves or the rest of the NL East before our final predictions?
Now let's get to final predictions.
All right, Leor, kick it off for us.
Oh, well, I told you I didn't think the Marlins were going to finish last, and I'm going to follow that up by saying I think the Nationals, 2 years removed from their World Series championship, are going to finish in last place. I think they need too much to break right for them, and baseball's just mean like that. The baseball gods are just mean like that. So I'm going to take the Nationals to finish last, the Marlins before them, Phillies to be right around 500, and then the Mets to finish second, and the Braves to finish first. And if you're looking for something to watch, October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, Braves versus the Mets.
Yep.
In Atlanta, potentially for the NL East. That is going to be crazy. We talked a little bit about the Mets needing some time to gel, and it's interesting to note that the Mets versus the Braves, except for those last 3 games in October, their games are really front loaded. In the early months, they don't play each other at all in August and September. So if the Mets take some time to gel, the Braves could build up a kind of a sizable lead. But yeah, I'm going to take the Braves to pull it out. I think it may come down to that last series in October potentially. But yeah, I'll take the Braves to win it. But the Mets are going to make the playoffs. They'll probably play the Padres in a 1-game playoff to get into the bigger section. How much fun will that be?
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, I want to sit here and say I think the Phillies really could crash and burn. This bullpen doesn't pick up for them, and you're not getting that consistency out of the lineup. I think it's going to be hard for the Phillies to really make a stand in this division, especially when they're playing teams like the Braves and then the Mets, and then they're playing the AL East as well, which we know is just loaded with good offense. Honestly, I got the Phillies coming in last, really only a couple games behind the Nationals, so I think could be a 4th. I do think the Marlins are going to surprise some people. I think they're going to be around 500, maybe a little better. It's going to be really exciting to see a lot of those young players, especially in that rotation, pitch more than 6, 7 times in a season. And then, I mean, I like the Mets and I like that lineup, but I don't know if they have what it takes over the entire season to win this division over the Braves, but I don't think the Braves win the division by too many games. I do think it is one of those close division races where the Mets end up coming in second, but they're going to secure that wild card, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not as quite as high on the Marlins as you guys are, but again, I really like the Cubs last postseason, and look what the Marlins did to me then. So I hope they prove me wrong, because they're an exciting team moving forward. Like I said, just don't think it's this year for them. So I have them in last. I have the Nationals, right up below 500, right in that middle no man's land with the Phillies. So I think are going to be right above 500, which again is underachieving with the payroll they have, the talent they have. That's not a good look for them. I think the Mets will edge out the Phillies, come in second. I think there's going to be, I think the Braves are going to have a pretty good margin on first place, 10 games or so. But I think the Mets can push for a wild card. And I'll reiterate it again. I think the Braves, I know I've said some strong words about the Cardinals, but I think the Braves could be that team that could knock off the Dodgers if someone's going to this year. Then with the Padres as well. So I think the Braves win it pretty handily, and I think they're poised for a good postseason run.
Yeah, well, there you have it. That is our NL East preview, which means coming up next, we're going to jump over to the AL finally in our next episode. But before we sign off here, I have my usual today in baseball history. This one a little Baltimore centered. We're going back a while here. 1914 is a guy you guys may know. His name is Herman Ruth. That rings a bell at all for you. Actually hit his first professional home run today in 1914 in an exhibition game when he was playing for the International League's Baltimore Orioles. Good 40 years before what we know as the Baltimore Orioles came. But I mean, today, 1914, the legend was born. So I thought that was a pretty cool one. That's one thing Baltimoreans can always say. They housed the home of Babe Ruth while he made a living with the Yankees. But it's time for us to sign off here. We hope you all enjoyed. Let us know what you think about the NL East and your predictions. But for now, it is time to walk it off.